Hello, everyone. Congratulations on making it this far in our journey together. Today, I'm going to introduce you to our second practice for utilizing, processing, metabolizing energy more closely to the source and further away from the old paradigm way of eating. And that is meditation. Of course, it goes without saying that there are many different styles, techniques, systems, teachers, and approaches to meditation, all of which would perhaps be in the same ballpark, but definitely not in the same seat in the same ballpark. Some may be in another ballpark altogether, because the spectrum is that wide and varied. So even if you've been initiated into the Kaliana Way of meditating, or have been working with me for some time, the following will probably be some new information, especially because I'm going to bring in this component of sleep and invite you as an extracurricular experiment to include a new way of understanding sleep as it also relates to fasting and breatharianism and the other practices and lifestyles that in one way or another most of the deep and genuine spiritual traditions, and especially the monastic ones, share in common. And as I've said multiple times now, I intuited all those years ago, before I had been officially introduced to any of this, that the stories of the monks and yogis, saints and sages and masters from all cultures, all religions, all eras were tapping into something deeper and not merely going without whatever this otherwise assumed necessity of our biology or even psychology. I'm also going to share a little bit more about my experience with meditation and sleep and fasting and breatharianism, and how it all relates to a new kind of energy source that you can utilize in the place of eating, or at least in the place of eating as you always have, as you continue taking first step, second step, third step, and embarking on this journey to quote unquote achieve your goals, or to fulfill and arrive at where you're being called. I will also, of course, tell you why I believe that my style and approach and system of meditation is most conducive to this process, and will provide in the supplemental materials folder a sample guided meditation audio recording for you to practice at home. And just like with yoga, I highly recommend that you keep it in the Kaliana container. Again, not as an elitist thing or a control thing, but at least to start, not venturing out to other meditation or yoga teachers, so that you can see how all of it merges and interweaves and blends together with what we're doing here. Eventually, if you like, of course, you can feel free to do whatever you want. But I would recommend that you try this out for a time, just to see what happens. There's also, just like yoga, an entire other course that I have with lots of videos if you'd like to take an even deeper dive, because it's not just about the meditation technique, but an overall practice of cultivating your interior life, your interior self, the interior domain, as well as spiritual inquiry for healing, transformation, and evolution. So there's a whole lot more than what I'm just going to give you today. But even if you have done that whole lot more with me already, please still watch this video, because there's sure to be more information and connecting dots, filling in the gap for how it applies to our conversation here. Just like the old paradigm assumptions and beliefs, as well as however you want to take this, lies and dark agenda conspiracy to not tell us the full truth about how much we should eat and what we should eat, and even using food as a weapon against us. Even if you don't believe that conspiracy theory, at the very least, I hope you're seeing by now that what you've been conditioned to believe and do is not necessarily universal and not necessarily the way it has to be. And could be even having adverse effects on you. You just didn't know it. Or you knew it, but you didn't know there was any other way. That's just the way it is. Similarly, the same has happened with sleep. All those many years ago, when I was reading the stories of the monks and yogis that didn't eat much across the board, that also went with not sleeping much. And also intentionally sleeping in extreme conditions. A very basic bedroll on the hard ground, or even, I think in the Zen tradition, they sleep with their head on a wooden block or a brick or something like that. And there are many accounts of yogis and monks or sadhus in India that have taken a vow to never lie down again, and therefore, quote-unquote, sleep sitting up or standing up in meditation. So not eating much always went hand in hand with not sleeping much. Or we could say not needing food in the conventional way or in the conventional amount always went hand in hand with not needing sleep in the conventional way or the conventional amount. Just like prayer and fasting always went together, so did fasting and vigil keeping, to use the Catholic monastic term for it. And when I was on my own discernment journey to see if I wanted to become a monk, I would go on all the different websites for the monasteries that I was interested in joining, or at least inquiring about joining. And some of them would have like an FYI for the public, their daily and nightly schedule or routine. And I was always drawn to that page because I wanted to know what they were up to. And I would often follow along with my own meditations and prayers throughout the day at certain times of the day. And look at the clock and think what the monks must be doing now. I was like a monastery stalker. And in the more austere communities or flavors of monastic life, they would literally get up and pray vigils, which is one of the 7 prayer periods in the Catholic monastic life, at 2 or 2:30 in the morning. Or some a little more lenient, 4 a.m. or 4:30. But not past that. Before sunrise. And whenever I'm visiting, that I shared with you was the setting for my kind of initiation into this, and that I and Christy and I have been to many times for many different reasons. I always go to the 4:30 a.m. vigils, prayer service, chanting service. And it's one of my most favorite times of the night to be awake, that 4 o'clock hour. And vigils service is most certainly my favorite prayer to observe and participate in at the monastery with the monks. Because it's dark, it's quiet, the candles are lit, it's before the buzz and the energy of the day and the sunlight. It's very sacred and very inward, very beautiful, very lovely. And so, spontaneously, alongside the overnight, no pun intended, shift into breatharianism, or into only eating when the body said to, only eating when I'm hungry, also I was flipped into the observance of not sleeping much as well. It's very obvious, very clear, that there's a direct proportion, a direct correlation with heaviness in the belly. And I don't mean like fat obesity, I mean food in your stomach that needs to be processed and digested, and sleep. So food coma is not just something that happens. In fact, it doesn't even happen to everybody, probably mostly only happens to kaphas in the Ayurvedic dosha world. But I could be wrong. Because all of the blood, all of the prana, all of the energy, all of the attention goes to that area. Its concentration leaves the brain, leaves the heart, goes to the gut. Minimal amount required in the brain and the heart so that all the reserves can go to the stomach, especially if it's a heavy meal, especially if you already have a sluggish digestion, which then is going to cause you to feel sleepy and tired. So this 8-hour per night suggestion or requirement that many people think we need is, if not a full-on lie, at least a belief or a necessity that comes with eating in the way that's also requested or required or suggested in that old paradigm. 2,000 calories, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Not to mention because of that program, this is what you need. If you don't get that, I can remember having a lot of anxiety if I didn't get a full 8 hours of sleep. Did that anxiety come because I was actually sleepy the next day? Maybe. Did that anxiety come because I believed that I needed 8 hours and that something bad was going to happen if I didn't? Or did that belief, kind of like the chicken and egg thing, come from an experience, or the experience come from the belief, vice versa, and reinforce each other? Just like we talked about in the belief video. Not to mention the also codependent relationship we have with depressants and stimulants. So caffeine first thing in the morning, because if you didn't get a full 8 hours of sleep to process that food, then you might feel sluggish and tired because you're still got most of your blood in your stomach churning it up. And you feel heavy or lethargic, so you need a boost because you only got 6 hours of sleep because of our lifestyle, or because you have to get to work at a certain time. I'm not going to go into the 40-hour work week slave trade that we have, because I think that's way outside, but you can see how it's related here and how that's been weaponized against us. So we've been told we need this certain amount of food, calories, etc., 3 meals a day, and because of that, 8 hours of sleep, and then 8 hours of work, 40 hours a week. That then if you have other responsibilities, want to enjoy yourself or have kids or want to have any kind of social life or cultivate your marriage relationship or friendships or whatever it is, then you don't have enough time in the day. If we lived more naturally as we were intended, without all this weaponization and conditioning, there's more than enough time, more than enough hours in a day. And then some, which again is a whole other conversation altogether. We get into money, finances, the economy, capitalism, socialism, communism, contributionism, which I do believe contributionism is an answer to all of that. But in any case, for our purposes here, coffee in the morning, because you didn't get 8 hours of sleep, but you did eat 2,000 plus calories, so you didn't process it all. You need that coffee to get going. You have crashes throughout the day. And because you've been jacked up and wired, possibly even drinking coffee past a time of day that you should, because you need to stay focused to get your work done, or you've done your work and you get home and you need to stay awake and alert in order to cook dinner or be with your kids or your family, then you can't fall asleep at night adequately or rest soundly. So then we have sleeping aids, sleeping pills, downers. Whether pharmaceutical or illegal or recreational or supplement-based, doesn't matter. Even if it's a healthy one, it's still in that hamster wheel. There's actually a study that I read one time where they took a group of people into a setting, an environment where there was no electricity, no lights at least, but everything else was provided for them. It's not like they lived in a dungeon. They just lived in a controlled environment where there was no electricity. Think also about the circadian rhythms that get very messed up. Think about third shift or graveyard or swing shift or second shift workers that get way thrown off by the light and the dark. There's a whole other conversation around daylight savings time and working in the fields and going to bed at sundown and getting up at sunrise, and the fact that our electricity, our lights that we can keep on 24 hours a day, and we've of course adapted to it because we're adaptable creatures, but it throws a lot of things off. And so in this study, where actually they were not required to work or do anything else, just live and do what they wanted to do, and the invitation, the requirement, the instructions, no coffee, no sleeping pills, was similar to my criteria during my first 21 days. Only sleep when you're sleepy and be awake when you wake up. That's it. And the hypothesis or the inquiry that they were researching is to see how the body would naturally reset itself. No caffeine, no sleeping pills, no extra requirements, no electricity. Let your body fall asleep whenever it wants to and wake up whenever it wants to. And they wanted to see if there was a noticeable pattern across the board. And guess what? There was. Every person naturally fell asleep at sundown, slept for a few hours, naturally woke back up at midnight or 12:30, sometimes a little later. They were very awake and refreshed and present and alert for 2 or 3 hours in the middle of the night, and then naturally fell asleep again around 4 o'clock, 4:30, and slept till sunrise. And I don't know if you know this or not. Those of you who like to read a lot or are literature buffs might know that there's a very commonly accepted and known fact that before there was electricity, at least in American literature, before electricity, they would report as though it was no big deal, as though it was just how it was. Like when people 200 years from now read some of our writings and we're talking about text messaging, they might not have text messages then, but it's just a word that we use, assuming everybody knows what it is. Similarly, they would talk about first and second sleep. So it's exactly like this experiment that everyone reset to the same, falling asleep at sunset, sundown, sleeping a few hours, waking up very naturally, very alert, very awake, very present, very fresh, midnight or a little thereafter, for a couple hours, 2 or 3 hours, and then fall asleep again around 4:30, and then up at sunrise. And throughout the day, when they were awake, they were very energized, refreshed, and not lethargic or crashing or needing caffeine and sleeping pills. So in this old literature, it was said literally that in the middle of the night, everyone pretty much woke up and was awake for 2 or 3 hours. And they would either read or pray or write or spend time with their families or go visit friends or make love. It did say in some of the studies that I've seen. Specifically, making love during this time was a common practice. And so, because I love vigils and that time of day, I feel is very sacred. And because the monks do it, when I spontaneously flipped into a breatharian and that new system, it just so happened that Christy and I were going to the monastery then, and I always do vigils with the monks anyway. I decided also to experiment with this other component that I had always been interested in as well. How the monks supposedly sleep standing up or sitting up and don't lie down, or if they do lie down, they don't sleep very much, or way less than 8 hours for sure. And how that related to fasting. So I decided, rather than giving myself the same criteria because I had to work once we got back from the monastery, it was conducive to continue the eat only when I'm hungry thing with regular life and having responsibilities and job. But it wasn't necessarily conducive, of course, to just sleep whenever the body felt sleepy or be awake whenever the body wanted to be awake, because I had to work and had responsibilities. So I devised a plan to go to bed at midnight and wake up at 4 a.m. Only get 4 hours of sleep per night. Just like breatharianism has become kind of a fad that unfortunately is not taken by everyone in the spiritual way that I do, a thing called the Uberman sleep cycle and other variations of it has become popular as well. You could check it out if you want, but again, just like these other things, don't run over there and copy that, because actually they talk about napping around the clock. Napping rather than meditating. They don't talk about meditating or spiritual stuff at all, and they pretty much use it just so that they can have more awake hours in the day to be more productive and get more stuff done. And where I come from and where I'm going with this is way beyond that. But it has become a thing. It's become popularized. There's kind of a movement of people that do this periodic napping over a 24-hour amount of time without a regular sleep pattern. And they claim to be energized, wide awake, and much more efficient and productive than the standard schedule, the standard recommendation. So I referenced that a little bit as I was dipping my toes in, but mostly, again, it was intuition and my own research and whatever had also reawakened from past lives of doing this many times, I'm sure. So, went to bed at midnight on the dot. I stayed disciplined with it, and this lasted probably about 9 months, maybe a little less. Consistent and varied extremes and combinations of fasting, breatharianism, and sticking with bed at midnight, up at 4 a.m., and then I would get right on my practices, either praying vigils myself, meditating, a couple of hours of yoga right away, or sun gazing, or pranayama, or connecting with the earth. And then, as I was able to, I would meditate, even if they were short, like in between clients, if I was working, about 6 times a day. So 4 hours of official sleep at night, and then about 6 periods of meditation during the day, even if they were short. And I was able to maintain that, along with fasting and breatharianism, because I wasn't constantly heavy and lethargic in digesting food, for, I really can't remember, 6 to 9 months, something like that. Combination of those two things, very consistently, every night, every day. And I can attest to a very high vibe quality of wakefulness, presence, alertness, groundedness, energy, and efficiency, productiveness, creativity. As well as, again, deeper and clearer connection through all my being with Source itself. So I was able to confirm, yet again, that what I intuited all those many years ago, reading the stories of the monks and yogis, that they were, in fact, tuning in, tapping in, resourcing from somewhere deeper, closer to the source, and weren't just going without and punishing themselves. And unfortunately, not gonna say any names here, but I had a conversation with one of the monks that I kind of had developed a little pen pal friendship with. And as I was experimenting with these practices that I knew they were also, and having my own profound experiences with them, I asked him about his experience to see if it was the same as mine, tapping into that deeper source, or if his experience was just kind of doing without and making yourself weak in order to think you're being humble or having solidarity with the poor or experiencing suffering as Jesus did or something like that. And the latter was the case. He didn't understand higher energies. He did not understand tuning into the deeper source. Maybe he would say he felt closer to God during that time, but it was because of the absence of sleep or the absence of food. It was more of a mental, during that time I have to rely on God even more because I'm tired and because I'm hungry. Not actually getting the energy, getting the vitality, getting the life, getting the sustenance directly from source or closer to source. So that's unfortunate, and I think that's the case in most monastic communities across the board. They still do exteriorly the same practices as have always been done, but for some reason the essence or the originally intended depth of them or reason for them has been lost for some reason. So we're reawakening that here. So before I move on to a couple of other reasons for meditating and how it relates to this fasting, feasting, and breatharian course, the journey we're taking here together, and then a brief introduction to my style of meditation, where it came from and all of that. As sleep goes, I've also seen studies that show when your brain is in that meditative state, and remember, as I teach in the larger meditation course, to me, the difference between meditating and sleeping is not upright versus lying down, or cushion versus bed and pillow, or during the day versus at night. But it is whether you maintain conscious awareness during what otherwise are standard sleep states. So meditative states in brainwave terms are not different than sleep states. The difference is maintaining conscious awareness or quote unquote blanking out, passing out, if you will. Losing consciousness relatively, because ultimately, and that's a conversation for another time, consciousness is not lost, even during sleep. But in any case, these studies show conscious awareness in meditative states for, let's say, 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, is equal to sleeping for 3 hours. I have seen and heard that study before, as far as rejuvenation and energy is concerned. So if you do want to try the sleep thing, it's pretty profound. I'm just suggesting, just like don't do fasting and breatharianism just so that you can lose weight. Let that be a natural byproduct. Don't try the sleep thing just so that you can get more shit done. Use it so that you can, 1, prove the conditioning wrong. 2, tap into a deeper source. And 3, have more waking hours for the interior work. Journaling, reading sacred texts, doing intentional things. But even if you don't try that sleep experiment, it's either this room or the camera or the content that we're talking about, I don't know, but this video and the last one, I've seen a bunch of little orbs zooming around, and there's another video that I did about a year ago, or a little longer than that, in this same spot where there was about 30 minutes of little dots flying all over the place. So don't take your attention away from me, but see if you notice those little things. I've actually not seen them live like this before. I usually see them when I watch the recording back. Pretty cool. But I've seen 2 of them in this video just today. Oh, it's amazing. Not because that makes this all spiritual and stuff, but there's just more going on than we could ever imagine. And I love it as confirmation that there are visitors and guides, if you will, looking out for this process that we're doing together. But the reason, even if you don't do the sleep experiment or the vigils experiment, this is practice number 2 for what we're doing here, because it's another option along with the other 7, or the other 5, 7 total, to do in place of eating, or as a supplement to fasting, either during the period of time that you would normally be eating, either for an energy boost or just because you're reprioritizing and reprogramming your schedule and what you do. So, well, what do I do when I'm not eating? One of these practices, because you've been eating every day for your entire life, and that takes up a certain amount of time during the day. So now you're going to have more time during the day to do other things. Think of all the dishes you don't have to do. Think of the money you're going to save. Think of the cooking you're not going to have to do. Even if all of that's enjoyable, that's fine. But sometimes dinner takes up like 3 hours fully, from cooking to eating to cleaning and all of that. And not to mention digesting, like we've talked about. Much more than 3 hours. So anyway, this is another option for what to do, not only for energy rather than third dimensional old paradigm eating and food, but also what to do when you'd normally be eating. Especially for those of you who claim, I don't have time to put towards meditation, or I don't have time to put towards yoga? Yes, you do. And even more now, and even less of an excuse. Pretty cool. So it's a bunch of birds. I don't like to say kill a bunch of birds with one stone. Let's say, we'll say this, release a bunch of birds from one cage. How about that? No longer kill a bunch of birds with one stone. Release a bunch of birds with one cage door opening. Cool. So because 20 minutes in meditative state, conscious awareness equals 3-hour nap. And for me, at least, I've never liked naps. Like an official lay down, crash out, take a nap, because I always feel even more lethargic when I wake up. Just like eating sometimes, feeling even more heavy, less energy, and it's kind of confusing. I thought food's supposed to give me energy. I thought sleeping's supposed to give me energy. But laying down to take a nap, not to mention it's easy to then crash out for an hour, 2 hours if you have the time, and then it makes it even more difficult to sleep at night, but you needed that nap because you were exhausted. Short, even 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes. 5 minutes really is enough if you focus and concentrate and dip in for that amount of time. But 20 to 30 minutes, they say, is equal to a 3-hour nap, and you're much more refreshed. Sometimes, don't let this replace meditation, especially if you're picking up your periods of meditation and the frequency, then you can afford this once a day, is to put your legs up the wall and take a meta nap, meditation nap, where it's kind of in between, not a full-on sleep and nap, but not upright sitting meditation. Whenever I take a meta nap with my legs up the wall, head on the bolster, or not if you don't want, from the yoga sequence, then 10, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm awake and very refreshed, similar to meditation, but not all the way into crash out nap time. I'll choose that sometimes if I'm a little too tired to sit upright in meditation. I'd rather just go to sleep for a few minutes. You can set a timer if you want. Anyway, that's one option, and will have a similar effect energetically to replace either sleep, if you want to try to fast from sleeping, or will replace eating or supplement your eating less. The other two reasons that I'd like to give, that I won't go into much here because I have a full package of information and teaching about this in the meditation course that I teach. But when you are consciously in that meditative state, there is a healing process that gets underway. Healing, psycho-spiritual, even physical, energetic, emotional, on all the layers, wounds, or what I call nexus knots, or what in the ancient yoga texts are called samskaras, healing traumas that have hooked themselves to the ego or vice versa, or created subpersonalities, created shadow, which is part of what I'm asking you to get to know and to look into and to start changing and to heal in order to more properly discern and be on this process, be in this process consciously and making choices not from projection or ego, and being more clear in your discernment. All of these things that I'm saying, make sure it's not the ego, make sure it's not projection or conditioning, make sure it's not this and that coming from poor conditioning, get it moving in the right direction. Meditation can literally help that, because, as I like to say, it softens the soil of your soul, or it tills the ground of the exterior surface that has become hardened and protective, or it takes off that outer layer and thus dips down into where the roots of these issues, these problems, these patterns, these habits are that are preventing you energetically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, whatever it is, from making progress. So that's why this is not just about not eating. As I said in another video, maybe you have tried some different diets and have come up against a wall where it's not working anymore. You lost some weight, but then it's not working. Well, that's because it's not just a physical problem. You think, well, I just can't do it. This is as far as I can go. No, you can. You can go further, but it has to be coupled with now spiritual healing practice to release all the blockages. Remember, blockages are preventing prana, God, source energy, from coming through more fully. Again, you can know from higher knowledge and be aware and directly in tune with oneness with God. But that doesn't mean that the body, the mind, lower mind, the emotions, the energies are on board as well. So opening, breaking down the walls, the obstacles, the blockages are very important for this source power, energy, prana, God, to come through more and more and more naturally without hindrance for energy, vitality, sustenance of life. Not lethargy, not weakness, not tiredness, not density, not agitation, not spike crash, binge purge, but high vibe and steady and grounded. Sometimes high vibe is sporadic, and flighty. High vibe, steady, and grounded is what's possible here. So the way I teach meditation, and I do believe that if you just practice my techniques that will be found, some of which, because I have others, will be found in the supplemental material folder, then it does naturally transmit the Kaliana container and way. And that process can begin for you. But I would highly recommend that you understand more where I'm coming from in that regard as well. How that actually works, and to learn the tools, just like you're learning the tools here, learn the tools of self-inquiry, and learn the tools of the interior work for healing transformation, and evolution of consciousness on every layer. This is multi-faceted, multi-dimensional to really make it a full picture, process, and practice and lifestyle. But take it at your pace, take it as far as you want or feel called to. On that note, I will briefly say my system, my techniques, it's really challenging for me to say mine, actually. When I say that, it's not that I'm being possessive or having some kind of primary ownership over it. It's just to say that I'm not following, consciously at least, a particular lineage. I've had a hard time answering people's questions over the years, actually, when they say, what lineage do you teach in any of this? Because it's not just one thing. I can point to my inspirations, my teachers along the way, but even they are across many different lineages and systems, and I'm not repeating any of their stuff verbatim. I'll reference it, or I'll quote it, or I'll talk about it here and there, but it's couched in the larger context of what I'm now doing, which is kind of them plus me. I've transcended and included them in yoga, meditation, and this work. And I've had even less official training in the fasting, feasting, breatharian work. So my techniques are also not ones that I made up. At the same time, I don't claim that I'm being given these downloads from extraterrestrials. I have a whole other commentary on that. How I play and walk the middle line. I have a finesse with those two things. I can't say it's mine, I'm making it up. On the other hand, I can't say, oh yes, I go into this kind of trance state and I receive these downloads and these psychic messages to give to you. It's a collaboration, a combination of both. I know and am sure that I have others behind the scenes helping me, inspiration from the Holy Spirit, reawakening from a past life, plus, not like I'm taking credit for it. I don't have to have credit for it like that, but I'd like to acknowledge that it is from Kemper's research and instincts and studies and knowledge and wisdom and intuition that has been cultivated over the years. So I did practice pretty much two different styles of meditation for maybe 8 or so years before I then very spontaneously graduated in my own practice to doing these other techniques. They kind of came out of nowhere, or they came from my practice, that I then started writing down and systematizing to be repeatable for others to practice as well. So one of those samplings is in the supplemental material folder. As a guided audio. It's called the Unnamed Kaliana Meditation Method. And I have actually, I think, 4 more besides that one. But that's a nice intro. But there's a lot more where those came from. So if you're interested after you watch those, I highly recommend that you do. then we can go deeper into that course as well. So when you meditate, I preference being comfortable. I sit in these most of the time. They're called back jacks. I can also provide a link for ordering your own back jack. It's just a floor chair. You don't have to sit with no backrest in a certain fancy lotus meditation posture. That's for other systems. At the same time, I do not recommend that you lie down. Again, you can meditate lying down if you maintain consciousness. For this purpose, there's nothing special about having an upright spine. But the tendency is that when you lay down, you fall asleep and lose consciousness. So I recommend a comfortable upright position, but nothing fancy, nothing special, just sitting. Could also be in a chair, your comfy chair. Comfy enough to not be distracted and agitated, but not so comfy that you're going to fall asleep and lose consciousness. But falling asleep and losing consciousness is a part of the process in training those interior muscles to stay awake. Which leads me to the final piece or reason for meditating and how it connects in with this work is, along with vigils, which means like awake, vigil or vigilant means awake or wakefulness. As you do this practice, just like the high vibe but steady and grounded energy, there's also more and more a steady, calm wakefulness that you can tap into. That's one flavor of the ultimate reality. Meditation does not take you closer to source. You cannot be closer to source than you are right now. But you can be more in every layer embodied, more fully plugged into source, and consciously so, where you know that you are, and not just from the higher mind, but every kosha layer. So meditation doesn't take you closer to source, but there's an adage in the Zen tradition where they call enlightenment, which is another conversation altogether, what that even is. Enlightenment as a happy accident, which means you can't control when it happens. But it is said that meditation makes you more accident prone. So taking you consciously into realms beyond or beneath the conscious ego mind, or rather not conscious, the mindless, unconscious, waking state ego mind, because I also promote obviously wakefulness and presence and consciousness in the waking state. There's a lot of asleep people, so to speak, even in the waking state, and a lot of awake people in the sleeping state, which is what I'm pointing to here, and a wakefulness during waking and sleeping states. So a conscious connection with source itself more and more, because you've been taken away from your standard MO way of thinking and interacting and the personality kind of ego mind. So meditation doesn't exactly take you closer to source, but the experience of the ultimate reality, source itself, is more prone to awaken in you as you meditate. Plenty have awakened to it without a meditation practice, and that's fine. But the way I teach it, the way I practice it, is that a meditation practice is absolutely necessary and certainly doesn't hurt in the cultivation of the interior life, the interior domain, and connection with Source. Connection, union with God. As well as I said, removing obstacles, healing samskara, so that source power, light, prana, presence comes through more cleanly, more fully, giving you energy, as well as the little kind of 20-minute to 3-hour nap time equivalent that is going to assist in energy as well. So, if you're feeling a drop in energy that's not indicating hunger, you can choose legs up the wall, a few yoga poses, a full yoga sequence, or meditate. And then keep track of how your energy was affected by that. Rather than reaching, again, you're going to be fine. Maybe next time you're hungry. I didn't say you're going to be fine, maybe. Just so you know, you're going to be fine, period. Maybe next time you're hungry, or next time you think you're hungry, or next time you have that feeling where you normally reach, don't. Go meditate and see if that feeling doesn't go away. See if you don't feel actually even better than you did before. More awake, more alert. And then see if your sleep pattern doesn't shift a bit as well, or your need for caffeine, or your need for sleeping pills, or if when you get less than 8 hours of sleep, if your body is naturally sleeping less because there's less food and more meditating, and you don't have the same story or judgment or anxiety around that from conditioning, and then decide, rather than, oh no, I'd rather be sleeping, that's probably just because you haven't yet begun enjoying your waking life. And sleep has become an escape for you in the first place. But I love because now, where I'm at right now, I'm not doing the conscious 4 hours of sleep a night. But when I'm in a period of like on day 3, 2, 3, 4 of a dry fast, I'm awake after just a few hours of sleep, very naturally, very alert. All of this, of course, has to fit in with your lifestyle, and you'll figure that out. But don't just think, I can't. Oh, no. And actually, it might begin to change your lifestyle. Actually, it might inspire something else that allows you to not have the same job that you have now, if you don't like your job, or to save money and you can work less. Who knows? Just put it in there and let it expand like leaven. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like leaven in a loaf of bread. It's just a little bit, but it makes the whole dough rise. And so when I'm awake, I actually love it. It's not the same as sleeplessness. I didn't sleep much last night. It's like awake at 4 a.m. on day 2 or 3 of fasting. Or sometimes, and Christy and I are exploring this together, when we've not eaten for a couple of days together, normally we'd be maybe watching TV at night on the couch and both falling asleep, digesting food after a meal, but we're awake and like, no, not ready for bed yet, but kind of done watching TV right now, then we'll meditate or do another spiritual practice, exercise, journey thing, which I might can share with you in the light body practice conversation video. I think I might include that, actually. We'll see. But not to be revealed yet what that is. Have to sit with that possibility, that discernment, as another practice, another activity to do. So what to do, how to do it when you're not eating, what to do, how to eat when you're not eating, etc. What to eat when you're eating. In any case, to finish that train of thought, and then I'm almost done. When I'm awake and alert, very naturally, during a period of a few days of fasting, I love it. Not only it's before sunrise, and then I can watch sunrise, and I can sun gaze if I want to with the sunrise. But I get up and I have more time to spend before the day gets going in prayer, in meditation, in writing my book, in reading a book, in doing some yoga, light some candles, turn on some music or not, or even go on a walk if you feel safe in your neighborhood at that hour. Peaceful twilight walk, right? Pre-sunrise. Or is twilight nighttime? Pre-sunset. Twilight, dusk. I don't remember. Anyway. So, this is good stuff, y'all. You've been eating your whole life. You know what every food tastes like. You know what it feels like to eat. Try something else. You don't live by bread alone. Promise you, you'll have some kind of amazing experience that will then awaken other possibilities and ideas and creativity. I wouldn't be sharing this with you if it wasn't amazing. Not leading you down a road of bland and boring drudgery. It's quite the opposite. Keep it up. Be in touch. See you soon. Namaste.